How's it, guys? Um, today's broadcast is titled "The Education of a King." I'm going to try to essentially just get my message across. It's one of those broadcasts that I've done within other broadcasts and that sort of thing. But I think I want to stand it aside. And the reason is because it's been boiling inside of me for the last couple of months, and I've been looking for a way to bring it out um, appropriately or so. Just to give you a bit of background, those that know I'm a vegan, that means that I don't eat meat. Unlike the typical vegans, I'm actually plant-based. I'm not vegan because I really couldn't care what Molly, like what she ate or how she, yeah, like how you killed her, that sort of stuff, you know. Um, so I predominantly avoid eating meat. I do eat meat occasionally. So if you see me eating meat, boohoo, like if I skip gym once, I don't stop saying I gym. You get what I'm saying? And the reason I say that is because it's foundational to some of these things that some of these insights. It allows you to and I'll give biblical reference if I can find it. The story of Daniel and is it Daniel? The three guys that essentially were held by the king in Exodus and is it Exodus or Leviticus or Genesis, I think, even for that matter. Um, and they asked the king, "Can we not eat what your servants eat? Can we just have vegetables and water? And over the next 10 days, you can test us. And if we are better than your servants, then I think yeah, they get some position or they get freed or something like that. But if not, then yeah, you can do with us as you wish." Newsflash, 10 days later, the Bible says they were 10 times better than the king's servants. They were 10 times more intelligent. They were 10 times. And it wasn't like, if someone says they were better, they were marginally better, I say two noto, I say one noto. It's not a champion score. It's we thrashed the best that the king has to offer. So that's on that side. Yeah, I'm not an evangelist. If you want to eat vegetables, that's up to you. But as I say, it just clears your head. It allows your thinking to be a lot more pure and I'd say a lot more less interrupted. So in other words, I read ancient books, I read very, 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 very old books. And to read a book from 400 years ago without losing context and without getting lost in the semantics, the poetry, the description of the characters, that sort of thing, the description of the landscapes is also very big. You have to kind of have a clean, clear head when you do that. Otherwise, you'll get impatient, you'll get jumpy, you'll fail to link so much yeah, you fail to make the connections, that sort of thing. So it just helps me with my reading, and I love that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Um, the other thing is that I've started reading the Bible because I realized that you want us to follow a religion that you created or that like it excuses your behavior, that sort of a thing. And I'm not really for that. I'm not Christian, but I do respect holy texts and I do respect texts that have survived the test of time. As I say, I read books from 400 years ago, you name it. So for me, it was a journey of, I've done it before. I'm older now, a lot older, like 15 years older. And so it was a journey to say, let me actually get back to the word and understand what the word actually says so that you guys are not interpreting it for me and telling me principles that you like or don't like or that suit your fancy, that sort of a thing. Um, I think those are the two major driving blocks that I can think of right now. The other one has been over the past year, for that matter. I've been doing a lot of my family history, talking to my grandmother, learning about my great great grandparents, it's my grandmother's grandfather, for example. So it's not that old relative to time and relative to relationships. right? And so unlocking some of those nuggets and starting to mold my way of life in a way that suits what I think I want to be doing, at least for my time here on Earth. So that's just to give you a bit of background about where some of these insights come from and, why to you suddenly, but to me, it's a point in time where I get to then just have this conversation, the education of a king. And I'll be jumpy, but eventually it'll be coherent, right? Throughout the course of my life, I remember certain times when I would tap into that first principles type thinking. And one that comes to mind, particularly at this moment with this recording or podcast, whatever, is the story of Mandela. I remember one time sitting and thinking to myself, I actually am curious what happened because I was under the impression that, listen, um, if the apartheid government kept you alive for 27 years in jail, their food, their whatever, then there must have been a reason. And the biggest reason I can think of is that you're not a threat to them. Why would they kill someone like Steve Biko, Chris Hani, within a year of being jailed or being free or almost free, that sort of a thing, and keep you alive for so long when they could have killed you and come up with a story the same way they did with Steve Biko, that sort of a thing. But I thought, I'm not interested in conspiracy. Let me go and read. Let me go do the research. And I picked up the book Long Walk to Freedom. Most people don't know that Mandela actually wrote an autobiography long time ago. And that basically gives the story of his life. And the first thing that I picked up when I read that, and for me it was okay, everything else that happens makes sense, was literally at the beginning. Mandela starts Long Walk to Freedom by explaining this concept of a council. So the fact that when he was growing up, his father was an advisor to the king or to the chief at the time. So he would occasionally attend those lekgotlas, as they call them in Spedi, and sit as his father gave counsel. And he says it would essentially be a circle of men. Ooh, I think armpits. It would be a circle of men that would be sitting there and then deliberating the village's issues, that sort of a thing, and passing judgment or making judgment on what the fate of the village should be, the people that break the laws, that sort of a thing. And that was Mandela's grooming and upbringing, so much so that if you actually pay attention, Mandela is not involved in politics until he's about like late 20s, 30s, I think even close to his 40s. So he's a lawyer, he's accomplished, he's doing his work, he's going about his life before he goes into politics. And then hence the 67 minutes post that, then yeah, 67 minutes of life in politics or in service or whatever, the 67 minutes it represents. But the moment I saw and I understood that this man was actually being groomed to advise a king or a chief, everything else made sense because the education of a king is no child's play. And I'll borrow from the Greeks when you read about the Greek philosophers, because today the monarchs don't tell us how their kids are educated. All we know is that some of them go to Eton College and the like. And then from there, we don't even know what goes into there. But if you remember from the Greek philosophers, or when you read Greek, not even mythology, Greek history, Grecian, Greek, yeah, pardon me, the Greece, if I offend you. But yeah, I'm Zulu. I'm not well versed in what to call the practice of your history. I think if you have a Greek name for the practice of my history, then we can have that type of conversation. What stood out was they always would tell you that the young boy would be surrounded by philosophers and mathematicians and teachers and guides and whatever in all spheres. So in all spheres, generally it would cover astronomy, astrology, the ability to read the stars and be able to equilocate the weather, that sort of a thing. those of you that think that the ability to read the sky is an ancient woo-woo science or woo-woo skill, whatever, look, I'm trying to become and what do you call it, collegial in the conversation. But I would advise that you essentially humble yourself to actually finding out what it's about. The ability to read the stars actually has a very huge bearing on their ability to lead, not just lead, but their ability to essentially plan, that sort of a thing. There's a lot of things that you get from astronomy, right? I'm not talking about your daily sun astrology chart. I'm talking about you being able to interpret the position of the sky and the earth relative to that, and then how that repeats. And what most people don't understand or don't know is that the earth is tilted in such a way, and the universe, and also then the rotation of the earth happens in such a manner, in such predictable occurrence, that certain patterns emerge in the sky over what we today call certain time periods. But there was a time when time didn't exist, when Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday did not have a meaning. There was a time when summer, autumn, winter, spring didn't really have a name. And all you did was you understood that the position of the sky and the stars is this particular way. And that would then inform a sequence of events that then would follow. So some of you guys can Google what we call the Dogon tribe in West Africa. I think it's in Sudan. If not Sudan, it's Mali or Senegal, one of the three, the Dogon tribe. And what they would do, so today we would speak to astronomy for the sake of saying predicting, you know? And it wasn't predicting, it was reading. The same way you would look at the calendar and say, oh, today is the 15th of this month. Therefore, whatever, I must prepare myself for month end, or I must prepare myself for this. They would essentially look at the position of the stars, and they would understand that the next position is essentially going to allow us to be able to plant our farms, our fields, whatever, and be able to sustain ourselves. I really do implore you that you go and Google that video, the Dogon tribe, and what they've done and what they're still in practice today. Literally, as a child, you would be groomed to be able to perform certain rituals. We call them rituals because, again, we have this derogatory um, reference when it comes to anything other than what you used to today, right? But essentially, the same way, you wake up, you brush your teeth, you go through your daily routine, and at night you go into a evening ritual of lying down and sleeping and waking up tomorrow again. Same thing, their way of life would be in such a way that it would essentially pass time, set in motion a set of activities that informed you what to do when such and such was happening without you being able to look at the time. Even the sundial, it's a fairly new innovation. Some of you guys wouldn't have known that. GPS, for example, the technology that's available in GPS, not only does it come from the bees, the ability to echolocate back to a specific beehive, it also comes from the positioning of the sun and the stars, and those three, people call it Orion's belt. However, yeah, that, like that. Dear Lord, why am I sweating so much? Right? And so you would essentially study those patterns over time, over the course of your life, and they would essentially allow you to have certain practices, right? That would then allow you to thrive, that sort of a thing. So powerful was that we are alive today. If those guys had got those sort of things wrong, we would have been dead today. So I think there's a superiority to that type of, pardon me, that type of indigenous knowledge that makes you sit down and basically say, listen, I actually appreciate that. That's it. If you do nothing else, then I'm fine with that, right? But some of the benefits that came or come with that type of knowledge and education is that you become in tune with nature. You start to be able to speak the language of nature. You start to be able to do things that today, if we were to do, people would say we're on drugs, or people would say we don't love our lives or risk our lives, that sort of a thing. So I'll give you an example: taming lions, taming tigers, walking with lions if you're a king, if you're a prince, that sort of a thing. We today take that for granted, that wild animals are wild animals and there's nothing that you can do. And we don't understand that there's an energy and a communication that you can have that allows you to be in the same space with a lion and none of you feel threatened. You respect each other for who you are. That's the first lesson in the education of a king. Can you imagine? I wasn't even thinking of that when I started this recording. I just wanted to touch on something, and it just so happens that it opened so many other things that I had to finish the entire thought, right? So it would be you being in tune with nature, you being in tune with the elements. And that's because the elements talk to you, the elements impact and affect us. So today, a lot of that has been taken away because we've got LED with lights, we've got whatever. Most of us haven't seen the sky in months. Our eye is not trained to see beyond a certain darkness once the sun sets. And so our eye has become very, very lazy, such that we can't see the stars most of the time. And I'm talking you driving on the highway and the stars are literally there, but you can't see them because of the light that is, it's essentially manipulating your eyes and you name it, you can't see it. So that's a start. As a gent, be able to, or as a king, be able to connect with your energy, your natural energy. You are nature, you are part of nature. When people say I'm going to spend time in nature, I sit there and I ask myself, oh, but spending time with me, with people, is also spending time in nature. A lion doesn't walk away from the other lions, or a zebra for that matter, walk away from the other zebras and say, I'm going to spend time in nature. Like, dude, you are nature. You get what I'm saying? But just to use that to bring it back to a familiar language that says the reason then it would be to your advantage to get an education in astrology, in it's mainly astrology, then in energy, is it cosmology, astrology, astronomy, the sky, basically. The sky and its patterns, not the zodiac signs. Yeah, I'm a Cancer, that means I'm soft, emotional, whatever. No, not that one. If you do, good, because it also has its benefits. It's just on this platform, it's difficult to give it its legitimacy because, yeah, we're not all there, right? You guys will essentially think, hey, this guy's cuckoos, right? That's one. The next one is nutrition. It's the one I started with and I left it, but it really is nutrition. The ability to say, no, I don't eat that, or no, I don't want to eat that, or no, I don't predominantly eat that. So much of what we eat, gents, undermines our being. And I learned this from Rutendo Matinyarare, the guy that made noise, or is a common guest on Penuel's show, and he talks about this and that. Or he was on the news the other day, talking about how the mining companies created Eskom, the Eskom mess, and you name it, right? That gentleman. And I was by then, I think 2, 3 years into my vegan journey, and I sat down with him, and he was speaking about, we're there to speak about economics, how to solve some of the problems that we face in the country. And he said, if you don't mind, before we talk economics, can we just talk food and nutrition? And I thought, oh, this is the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me. You know, I normally name drop that I'm vegan, and then from there, give the benefits, and then the conversation basically gets close to a debate or an argument, and then I come back to the conversation. So it was the first time someone is actually inviting me to a conversation on that, but specifically on nutrition. And he put it quite simply, right? The micronutrients that are in food that you eat have got a mutation of their own, right? That's a plant, that's a piece of meat, whatever, that grows. So it goes inside your body and it nourishes you. It creates little nutrition. It essentially creates little blood. I'm not a doctor, by the way, I'm in finance. You guys know this. Essentially, like, let's say chemicals, hormones, right? But even hormones, we're so uneducated in understanding hormones. The best I can describe it for you is blood, at least the blood cells, the blood blob that makes up blood, right? That's the easiest I can explain it. The food you eat, the nutrition you take in affects that, right? Which then goes to your heart and pumps across the rest of your body, right? And then the blood that goes to the head is supposed to then nourish the head, feed the head. So whatever nutrients you put in that blood, it then starts to feed the brain and tells the brain how to function better. So, for example, if you're deficient in certain nutrition or certain what do you call it, vitamins, you name it, those things. Again, doctors, please jump in the comment sections, link to your podcast where you talk about how this actually works. But it basically informs your brain to feel better or feel worse. For example, that's why when you eat chocolate, you tend to be happy because chocolate has got chemicals or nutrition in it that allows you to release, I think it's dopamine or endorphins. It's a good feeling. Alcohol, for example, alcohol is an antidepressant. What it does is that it slows your responses to things. And as a result, some of the things that you otherwise, for example, when you gain liquid courage, it's because the mechanism that regulates speech. So when you have to say a bad word, it closes so that you don't say the bad word, you hold yourself. That mechanism starts functioning slowly because of the alcohol that you've just consumed. So now, when you want to hold yourself from saying the bad word, oops, it slips out before it clicks. And when you want to apologize, you realize that hey, I'm actually unapologetic. You get what I'm saying? That's why, as you're approaching the girl, you normally would be scared and you would turn away. And now, as the alcohol is taking its effect, you've said hello before you've even turned away. You've said I like your shoes before you even turned away. That sort of a thing. So nutrition is super important. What we don't understand or what we haven't engaged in enough nowadays is the fact that nutrition today, food today, is not the seed that God took and handed to Adam and Eve and said, listen, plant, work the fields, right? The seeds that we have today and the food that we grow today comes from Monsanto. Literally, one company on earth has got 90% of the patents when it comes to food technology. And I've said this before, if you're a lawyer, go into the space of intellectual property. And what you will find when you get to intellectual property is that the highest number of contracts or research or relevance for intellectual property does not even relate to people stealing work or scientists or whatnot. It relates to seed varieties. So I'll give you an example. If you're alive today, and this is Rutendo's words, chances are you've never tasted a chicken because a chicken in its original form no longer exists. The closest that he says he's gotten to was he was in a small town in France and he ate this thing, you know, and the taste was so phenomenal. When they said to him, that's chicken, his brain couldn't comprehend. What do you mean that's chicken? Like, I've never tasted anything like it. Those of you that are from rural areas and eat umleqwa, you will vouch with me that if you eat a chicken kaprai pack that you cook in the house at home versus if you eat umleqwa, the Bantus will say, what's this? Kohwa Sotho, you know, the chicken, the wild chicken that runs around at your house, whatever, whatnot. The taste is, you know it, like it's worlds apart, including the fact that the things that you can do with this chicken that you buy inside its packaging, go Pick and Pay, what ShopRite, that you can't do to the chicken yasemakhaya, right? Things like KFC, things like whatever, deep frying, those sort of things you tend to find often with the current chicken. And the taste is just worlds apart. Like the variety in taste is just phenomenal. Do yourself a favor and look up the patent on chickens or on chicken so that you can see that basically what you eat as chicken is intellectual property and genetic modification. So this taste, 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 this brand, this variety, whatever, belongs to me as Monsanto. That's why those of you that are chicken farmers, and I'm talking Godfrey level chicken farmers, gents that go buy chickens for 1,000 rand a cock, right? For its genetic, for its sperm, for its what it produces when it sleeps, when it mates with your other chickens. You see this in beef, for example, beef genetics, that sort of a thing. You get a certain type of beef that sells for so much more money, Wagyu, you name it. But Wagyu, it's not even at a genetic level. That's still at a grooming level. I'm still talking the sperm itself, the DNA at that level. And that's nutrition. And what has happened with the food industry, especially over the last 100 years, they essentially have made a trade off. So, for example, we are fine with this food causing diabetes as long as it can sit on the shelf longer. So, we take out the gene that allows it to go off within 4 hours of killing the chicken. But as a result of taking out that gene, the chicken lasts longer. But as a result of it being able to last longer on the shelf, it then is susceptible to certain type of illnesses that when you eat that chicken for nourishment, that chicken then makes your body weak when it comes to resistance against that particular illness, but strong when it comes to something else that the chicken today does to your body. So that's just nutrition and food. And that's why those of you that have had the privilege of growing up with your grandfathers, that sort of thing, they would strictly say, I drink umqombothi, for example. I don't drink processed beer. And they would say, umqombothi makes me last longer, or umqombothi allows me to do this and this. Some of the benefits that umqombothi would allow them to do would be to, because it's sorghum, it's fermented sorghum, right? You take the plant, you mash it, put it in water, let it ferment over a week, whatever, and then when it's done, you drink it and knocks you out, that sort of a thing, right? It fortified their brain patterns in such a way that if, for example, you were to walk long distances, so that's why you'll find often we say people from North Africa are a lot tougher or a lot stronger. And that's because they drink umqombothi and they eat meat or food that is a lot closer to its original form than those of us in urban areas that have to be catered for by large corporations. Then there aren't as many trade-offs. It's also why Manga Makaya villages a lot. You will find skinny, tough old men, and they're not sickly. Like they just live and live and live and live and live until the day they stop living. But they just live and live and live. Like yo, talabapila. And they're not on a healthy diet. They're not going to gym 3 times a week with their Virgin Active membership, whatnot. But the gents are skinny. The gents, obviously, you don't want to be that skinny, but if you were actually to engage their poverty, you would actually find that it's not a poverty like Yala Egoli, where you dying of hunger. With them, it's just a lack of anything recognizable as far as the West is concerned. But the gent is tough. He wakes up in the morning, he has his pub, and then he starts walking. And then all day, all he does is he drinks some kombochi until he sleeps at night. And at any given point in the day, he's walking wherever he needs to go to, and he can sit with you and he can narrate to you a story from 20, 30, 40 years ago in clarity, with clarity, in detail, you know, that sort of a thing. So that speaks to nutrition. And I don't want to spend too much time on nutrition because it's a taboo topic for most people. You guys like your food, it tastes nice, nya, 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 you name it, right? Gourmet markets, foods at the market, it's good. That's that, right? But that's the education that you need. It used to be that if you lose income, when it still happens, and you go walk the cows, whatnot, the gents in the fields understand and they know that, listen, I'm going to take the cows out in the morning and I'm going to come back with them in the afternoon. So while I'm out there, I'm not going to have access to food. Where now you eat in the morning is caffeine when you get to work, and then at lunch you're hungry again, and then at 3 you're already hungry again, that sort of a thing. They're out there for half the day and not even getting hungry. And it's not because they're randomly killing sheep and chickens and making a fire and cooking and eating that, and that sustains them. You get what I'm saying? It's more because they understand which plants to eat, and they eat it out of habit today. If I go and I speak to Mkulu and I say, listen, Mkulu, for me to last longer, for example, while studying throughout the night, what plant should I eat? I don't think he'd have an idea or he'd know. But if I walk with him and we walk the cows out, it's such routine that when he passes certain bush, and there are varieties of bush, by the way, he'll pull it out and he'll suck the nectar at the end, or he'll pull it out and he'll chew on the stick or that, whatever. That's called eating grains or eating legumes or whole, not legumes, oh, I sound so dumb after sounding so something, right? That essentially gives the body energy. The body understands the language of plants. So to you, it's like, ew, you didn't even cook it. For the body, it's like, oh, nutrition, oh, this, oh, that. And throughout the day, he's eating all of these sort of things. I know one of my favorite, Timavilo. And I've never found them go food lovers market. I find them when I go to Limpopo, Mavilo. Um, Brown looking thing when they're ripe, they're green, but then they turn brown. They're like prunes, but they never get black. They essentially become brown. And then when you eat it inside, it's matte like it's like eating, it's like a sponge, but it's like a sponge with flavor, with texture, sort of thing. Semi-sweet, but super nice, right? Being able to or eating those throughout the day while out looking after the cows, it created a certain form of nourishment that allowed them to live long, that allowed them to use certain parts of the brain. I even venture to say that gave them a certain level of bravery or a certain level of stubbornness that just allowed them to just be able to stand by commitments that they'd made a year, 10 years, 100 years ago, right? That sort of a thing. So it's nutrition. That's the next big one. So by now, if you're planning to be a king, you have the ability to navigate the elements, to read time, to read space, to read the energy, and to be able to reciprocate. And then you also have the ability to eat food that is conducive to what you will need to be able to be a strong man that is functioning at the level of IQ and engagement and intelligence that is required. So, for example, when we say that with depression was swept under the carpet, or with diabetes, when undetectable cancer, whatnot, one of the brave things that Rutendo said to me, and I appreciate it, I take it, I agree with him, right, was that actually it never existed because we ate food that was resistant to that type of illness. So I'm just gonna adjust the light a bit. I don't know what happened, but it seems like it just got lighter or darker in here, you know? So as a result, Ogogo to live to 87 because the food they were eating did not have a genetic mutation that allowed cancer to come in or diabetes to come in and that sort of a thing. And today, if you talk about that, it's laughable, it's laughed at. I've never seen Ogogo running a marathon, for example, but she's 87. How? Why? Right? There must be something in the food that she ate as a kid growing up. And she said it to me, right? I've shared some of the stuff with you guys. Koreana rice, they grew rice in the field. The rice is actually not white, it's not brown, it's black, that sort of a thing. Sugar as well. She says, or the sugar, they used to drink black sugar. And that used to stain their tongues, so their tongues would be black, right? And you look at that source of that type of food, and it essentially informs why they're able to live so long and be so resilient and strong and what have you. Yeah, my grandmother at 87, maybe now she's starting to get frail, but yeah, look, up to now, it's been a frailless life. Whereas I've seen people in urbanized areas at 60, yeah, it's a that sort of a thing. Right. So I move away then from the ability to read space, time, position yourself, locate. And even though I'm moving forward, these are concepts that are so central to what makes us that I'm actually doing them a disservice. I should have been recording 1 4-hour conversation on time and astrology and that sort of a thing. 1 4-hour session on nutrition, that sort of a thing, you know. But yeah, maybe the attention span and placating to you guys, I then spend the little time that I spend. The next one that you go to now starts speaking towards taming the environment and making sure that it's livable. So that's the ability to decide that, listen, I'm going to pick a plot of land that is going to allow me to start settling down and hoarding my day's catch, my day's kill, that sort of a thing. I don't know if you have to practice it, but I do know that at a bare minimum, get an education in it. Understand where the concept of building a fence around a piece of land and calling it your home comes from, what it then allows you to do, what it gives you the ability to do as a man. It unlocks certain parts of you that allow you to walk into rooms and negotiate and move in a particular manner. So when somebody wants to rip you off, when somebody wants to take your money, when somebody wants to invade your private space, that's why, for example, most people would say Zulus are a very violent nation. It speaks to colonialism, but it also speaks to the fact that they tend to still have that grooming and education that says ubuhle bendoda inkomo zakhe, his ability to build a homestead and to buy and have cows. That gives you a certain stature. It gives you a certain meter or detector for bullshit that allows you to, when you're talking to somebody, and the minute they don't make sense, you 100% say to them, angizwa mina le nto ukhuluma ngayo. You know, I don't hear this thing that you're talking about. I see that you want us to transact, and I see that you want us to form a relationship or engage, but I don't hear your terms of engagement. You get what I'm saying? Um, that's that as a start. Then the next one in that conversation, or not even the next one, I'm going to actually dwell on it. Um, it allows you to start then having a place of rest, because rest is still important. One of the experts on sleep asks, I wonder why sleep was invented, because it's such a dangerous thing considering we used to live in the wild. So for 8 hours, you're going to be unconscious. That means that anything that wants to kill you can come and kill you. So it doesn't make sense why we sleep, except if you study sleep not from a position of westernization where they say you're lazy if you like to sleep and we measure you by how hard you work, but you measure the brain activity that happens when you are asleep, the things that it does, things that you guys don't know. Sleep actually cures illnesses, things like Alzheimer's, diabetes later on in life. Sleep actually cures those when you are asleep, how long you sleep, when you sleep, that sort of a thing. So again, it speaks to when the sun sets, when you switch on the light, you're introducing an artificial day to your retinas and the communication that it gives your brain and the brain's activity. Ideally, what should be happening is that you should have minimal to no lights. And then when the sun sets, it should be dark around you. So instead of having the LED lights and lights inside your room, your house, it should ideally start getting darker. And what that does is it starts altering your brain and your perception of then what is required of you in the coming period. And what that then does is that it starts preparing you to wind down, sleep, and it also sets in motion a set of activities that then heal your body, bring back your plans, your memories, your whatever, and basically position them very well in such a manner that you can be able to engage. So, from what I can gather, one of the reasons that we started taming land or starting drawing patterns of land and saying that this is my piece of land, this is my territory. Animals do it as well. Lions, they pee around the perimeter of their pride, that sort of a thing. And when they are asleep, another animal knows not to cross that barrier. So it basically creates a protection. But in the DNA of that pea or whatever, it tells whoever is trying to enter that land that this is who is inside here. So, for example, to bring that home back to modern housing, whatever. There are houses, if you go past an embassy, you know that you're never going to try and break in. Thieves don't even think about it. We normally say because the security is high, but it's actually because, for example, the wall, the gate, they already tell you you don't want to get inside of here. Whoever built this can back it up. That's basically what it says to them. And that's why it matters to have a fence. That's why if your dad has got those fences today, or it's just a wire, or whatever, please make it a mission that you actually assist in restoring it to its actual health and strength and that sort of a thing, because it actually has a communicative, naturally, right? It has a natural communication to the rest of nature, fellow man, that you don't want to go over this barrier unless somebody allows you to come in. That's the importance of you having a home, gentlemen, today, right? That's from where I would say I'm for home ownership and having a house. If you have the ability to understand the communication and the freedom that it gives you as a man, and the ability for you to basically be able to build your wealth and your lifestyle, that sort of a thing, right? Then the next thing is that concept of who you allow through the gate, through the door. This is still the education of a king. So you can understand that by building that perimeter and your ability to read the elements and gather nutrition, whatever, you now have got an ability to house a woman, house a family, start building something. But because you're a man, you need to be able to give permission to somebody or something to come through there. And one of the things that need to happen inside that space, first of all, it's your space, and I've got no right to tell you what should be happening in there. But one of the things that I want for my space, for example, is that everything that is in that space should know that because this man has built a perimeter and he has allowed you to come inside of this perimeter, you are safe. Nothing can come into your kingdom, into your rule, your perimeter, and start violating you. That's why the constitution applies up to the gate. The minute you enter inside the gate, there's a new set of laws, whatever. But even those laws, if you read the history of Roman Dutch laws, they actually agreed upon. Um, they actually come about through us as men sitting around that lekgotla and agreeing that, listen, this works for my household, this works for my household. Ish, you know, the other day when I was walking in the street, your woman said you did this to her, and she came to me for refuge. So can you not do that, whatever? And we disagreed and we killed each other, or we agreed and then came up with a rule for our civilization to then say that in our community, we don't do this as men, but it's a negotiation. It's not something that comes down from the president or the, it's something that we arrived at. And if you don't understand that process of arriving there, that I have mastered this and this and this and have earned the privilege or the right to invite people into my space and then to protect and provide for them. That goes for the birds, and the insects that are inside of that enclosure. Because you can speak the language of nature. For example, when you put water outside as a man, and a bird comes and drinks from that water, you have had a conversation with nature and an exchange with nature. You have said to the birds, listen, I will tame water for you, and you will give me beauty. I will get to enjoy the colors of the feathers that you have. I will get to enjoy the song that comes out of your voice. So, if those of you guys that have got a garden, you can tell the different types of birds that sit in the garden. That is why bird watching is such a refined sport or activity that people do, hobby for that matter, because birds actually give a pleasant noise to the ears, to the senses, but they also give you good information back. So, for example, when Noah left the ark, They say he sent a bird up and that bird came down. He sent two types of birds. One went up and came down. The other went out and then came back, right? Two things that these birds were doing for Noah. The one that was going up, I think it's a raven or something. They only fly when they see land. So for as long as they don't see land, they don't go anywhere. They come back down and sit where they come from because it's safe here. So when Noah would throw the bird up, that would give him an indication of whether there's land or not, or in which direction the land is or not. Some of these you study when you learn to think to drive. I don't know what you do to boats to maneuver a ship. When they say the captain sinks with the ship, that sort of a thing. So it's the ability to navigate using birds. You don't catch that bird if you are unable to provide for it, if you are not gentle, because birds are also meat. Those of you that grew up in the village with me that know that you trap a bird and kill it, right? So if you are unable to attract different types of birds into your ecosystem, different types of bees, I've met a couple of beekeepers. The absence of bees tells you the quality of plants that we have today and the deterioration in our society as far as pollen is involved and our ability to have strong immune systems and that sort of a thing. Told you guys I would digress a bit, right? So that's essentially what your kingdom then becomes, your ability to attract exotic birds. That's what they sometimes would say when they sing your praises as a king, that he had exotic birds. It meant that you are so gentle, you are so bountiful, you are so well off that certain types of birds came to eat from your fields, maybe because of the grain quality, because of the this, because of the that, you name it, right? Then we move on to the fourth or fifth at this point type of education that you need as a king. It's your history, it's who you are, it's where you come from. As human beings, we have the unique ability to pass on our learnings to our generation, something that lions and other animals don't have. They teach the immediate generation how to survive the immediate thing, but they don't teach their offspring that, listen, your great great grandfather was building a dynasty and a legacy here, therefore you inherit this and then you protect it and then you expand it like this, like that, right? The closest lions came to that are the five brothers called Mapowa Matamaha that used to roam the Kruger National Park and the Limpopo, and I think they reigned for like 25 years as five brothers that would hunt together and basically expand their territory. Their territory was super huge, right? But we as humans have an ability to pass on those stories. That's particularly important today as well, because the earth has been corrupted. Evil men and women have created certain histories for certain people, and as a result, destined them to poverty or a life of servitude forever, for that matter. I read somewhere that it would take the average black man 28 lifetimes, not 28 years, not 28 um, decades, whatever, 28 lifetimes. 28. My son, his son, his son, his son, his son, his son. 28 times to be at the level of the average wealthy white man. 28 lifetimes. Let that sink in. So one of the ways that you actually pass on warnings and advantages and practices is through history. It's also why one of the first things when colonization happened was they burned indigenous knowledge systems, the ability to pass on history. Oh, it's barbaric to sit around the fire and tell stories. Oh, you can't write, but you draw cave paintings or you draw. Oh, but that is barbaric. You're like a child. Children draw. Real noble aristocratic men and women write, which is a very ineffective form of passing on information, because if you've ever tried to read a book, you can tell it's very boring. It doesn't keep your attention as long as conversation, for example, as well as a piece of art. The things that happen when you look at a piece of art, it moves you and tells you things immediately. Unlike with a book you essentially have to sit down, go through the 400 pages, and only at the end do you have the expertise in that particular thing, right? So the ability to pass on history and your stories, it's not even important. It's key to your DNA and identity and who you are. It is one of the leading, after nutrition, after your ability to feel as if you can control the elements, it's one of the leading contributors to you not being depressed, because you have a strong sense of who am I in this milieu called the universe that is trying to kill me. And if you don't gain that education of who you are, first from where you come from, but second from what your ancestors have overcome, it becomes very difficult for you to be able to participate in the activities of Earth from a position of confidence. And I'll even take it one further. When you speak to kings, they don't engage one another with confidence. So when a king asks their subjects or other kings to bow or kiss their ring or what have you, it's not from confidence. Oh, I'm confident I can make this king bow. No, it's from knowledge. It's from knowing who you are and then acting and being in that frame. If you don't have an education of who you are, if you don't have an ability to understand that the reason you're so good with maths, for example, or the reason you're so fastidious, or I threw that word in there just to show off, why you only OCD for things being prim and proper, for things being in line, for things being clean, that sort of a thing. If you don't understand that that comes from the fact that actually your great grandfather or your great great grandfather, so either your mom's granddad or your grandmother's granddad, or even further behind, their great 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 grandfather, that sort of a thing. If you're unable to understand that it's because he was so well organized, he was so meticulous, that what is left of that DNA is the fact that you become an auditor or a bookkeeper because you know how to organize information and stuff and then act from that position of being organized. Then it becomes difficult for you to act in your element and in who you are. Again, this is the education of a king. If it is radical, or if it's woo-woo, or if it sounds as if you're all right, whatever, I'm perfectly fine by that. If you don't believe that you come from a royal lineage, that is fine by me. Not everybody was a king at the end of the day. But I can tell you something, the fact that you're alive today means that you belong to a generation or a lineage that failed to die, that failed to be eliminated. It means it adapted to its time. If it's 1,000 years ago, it adapted to its time. And today it has brought you. If you fail to adapt to your time, it becomes the end of your lineage. I don't think the universe has memorial services. So, for example, the lineages that have died, I don't think we mourn them today or whatever. Life just goes on, you know? And if that's your portion, I'm 100% comfortable with that. But you wouldn't have lost if you found out that, oh, the reason you seem mad in certain rooms when you come up with ideas is not necessarily because you're mad. It's actually because you are trying to communicate something that has been central to your family legacy and your family lineage. And maybe you are failing to articulate it, or you're articulating it correctly, but your audience does not have perspective with which to understand and accept what it is that you're talking about. So that's where now some celebrities come across, or musical geniuses, or nerds, Einsteins, that sort of a thing, right? It's people who are enjoying the generational dividend of having been acted in the aura or knowledge of themselves. And that's why when you interview Jay-Z, for example, and maybe it's a bad example in light of the P. Diddy allegations, you name it, but just as a symbol of people that have risen to the pinnacle of their careers, your Michael Schumachers, your Louis Hamiltons, your Messis, your Ronaldo, your Oprahs, you name it. when you interview them and you ask them what was the reason for your success, Mapaputsi actually said this. Mapaputsi explains how he used to party with Paris Hilton, you know, and you then hear why he says that was. Where did that sense of confidence come from? One of the things that they say is Mina Bengizaz. I knew who I was. You sit there and you think, oh snap. If you listen to interviews with Brenda Fassie and you watch her documentary, you can see and hear that this person had a very clear, comfortable understanding of who they were. And as a result, they were acting out of their element, out of themselves. And therefore, they didn't need confidence, they didn't need motivational talks or inspiration in order to do this or do that. They just acted out of themselves. They listened to, they were more in tune with themselves, their intuition, so to speak. And that's because these are people that have always had a comfortable understanding of who they were. Most of them will tell you that we have a long history of music in my family, or we have a history of football in our family, or history of education. That is your lineage. That is part of the things that you've inherited by the time you're able to walk into the rooms that you walk into. From there, it starts becoming things like energy, your transfer of energy, and what I call your essence. And I think this is the last of the factors of the education of a king. It's your essence. It's that quintessential quality that makes you you. When you walk out of a room, the room has got a certain feeling about it or to it, especially if you're a guest speaker or whatever. But I'm talking in a home setting. If endlini. So, for example, if Ubaba, most of us have experienced this, right? We're having fun all day, whatnot, wara, and it starts getting dark. When it starts getting dark, certain activities start happening that settle the family down. Up until any minute now, the door is gonna open. And what happens when the door opens? Here walks in this big black giant that dictates over the rest of us. And he doesn't say anything. He's not angry at anyone. He's not done anything to anyone. He's just dead. And that's basically the air or the aura that precedes him. Because remember, you start your activities before he even opens the door, meaning that his essence, his energy in the universe, his energy in being has already preceded him. Obviously, you would look at the time and say, 6 o'clock, that's going to be home anytime soon, and process it from that angle. When there were no times, it then was the sun setting, but it also would be, for example, where you've got migrant labor systems, it would be at certain times during harvest most of the time, or during winter, whatever. At home, your great grandmother or your grandmother started certain pattern of activities because she knew that any day soon dad is coming home or grandpa is coming home. No phone came in, no telegram came in. All that happened was seasons changed and his essence got blown into that and started communicating to his family that it's time for me to come home, start preparing for me. And you see that even in the Bible. In the Bible, they speak a lot, or before Jesus would come, or before this would come, they would start preparing for the arrival of the king. They would start preparing for the arrival of whoever. It's not necessarily because a telegram went out, it's actually because the message had arrived. That's the other thing that they use. They would say the message had arrived. They don't necessarily say a text was sent or an email had arrived. The message had arrived. However, the message arrived, that was it. That's obviously a deeper way of looking at it. The other way, the way common psychology and popular psychology has framed it, is to say, what's this? Oh, it's how you make people feel. That is actually your essence, right? So when the phone rings and you pick it up and you look who's calling, something happens inside. Do you get excited, or do you feel a dreadedness or whatever? That is the essence of the person. It's how it's the aura. It's how when they enter a room, before they've even opened their mouth, the room gets tougher, or the room gets lighter, or the room gets more serious. Those that have met Nelson Mandela, and if you're one of those child prodigies that got to sit on his lap, please write in the comment section. They will tell you that if you were going to meet Madiba and he so much as came through the gate, or he was within close vicinity or whatever, you knew the air changed, the atmosphere changed. And when he was in a room, even worse. They say it was like magic. They call it Madiba magic. And I'm not going to the conspiracy side of it, what it was used for, how it was used to manipulate us or scare us, whatever. I'm talking to the actual experience of being in a room with Nelson Mandela. And just even before he speaks, appreciating that, listen, I am in a historical moment. And I'm saying to you, that is someone that was educated, groomed to advise a king. So obviously, when he's about to speak, the expectation, the atmosphere, the ambience in the room needs to start becoming noble, needs to start becoming such that words worthy of advising a king are about to come out. And I don't think it was a moment, a shushing of the room. I think there's just an aura that would happen that would tell the room to start settling down. And here's even the funny thing. Umadiba, before he would even speak, he actually would engage with people first. So there would be dialogue, there would be whatever. So that even speaks to that the aura even announces that now is time to have fun. Now is time to get familiar with one another. And I'm going to close with the story of lions. I gave my book to Trevor. Trevor, go babuga ka. The book speaks on lion tracking, and one of the causes, one of the things that they say lions do before they go on a hunt. A lion sleeps 18 hours, if you didn't know. Then when it wakes up, the pride, what it starts to do is that they start to lick each other and play with each other. Remember, lions don't have watches, so they don't know sleeping for 18 hours, right? And then when they wake up, they start a series of activities that energize them and bring them up to full life, right? So it will be the scratching of the manes and then gradually become increasing the energy, scratching one another. Then they get up, then they go into full on tussle and you name it. And they say what the male lion is doing, what the leader of the pack is doing in that exchange that lasts a number of hours for that matter, is that he is gauging how every team member is doing. He's reading their aura, he's reading their being. That is their greeting, that is their good morning. How are you? How did you sleep? That is them taking temperature. That is, I guess, maybe that's why women still get touched or angry when you don't say good morning regularly or when you don't say good night, because how are you in your aura and your era as a king and you're not checking up on your subjects or checking up on the constituents of your pride, how they're doing? You get what I'm saying? And remember, as I say, lions don't have watches and they don't talk to one another. And the tour guide then says, at some point, he has done his checks and he's comfortable that everyone is well. And the energy starts changing and play starts becoming a series of activities that lead to them hunting. So they start walking, they start trekking. That's why they call it lion trekking. And what they're doing in that walk, they're taking register of what has happened while they were asleep. How did the landscape change? What are the scents that they're picking up? Where did some of the animals go? What have you? That sort of a thing. And again, that has its own time. And then it stops. And when it stops, hunting begins. Again, there's no announcement. There's no, okay, men, let's get information. No, it just starts happening automatically. The sprinters start taking their positions. the jumpers, the runners, the hiders, this, they start taking their positions. And then there's dead silence. You wouldn't even tell that there's a lion nearby and it's right next to you, right? The energy is electric. And that's where you see a springbok its ear would pick up and you would know, they would know immediately. Don't ask questions, right? And that's because the energy that has been sent out is that of hunting, right? And that's why they even say to you, sometimes it's often rare that you'll find a lion in, I think, going with the wind. They often go crosswind or so, something like that. In other words, the reason that they're doing that or they hunt crosswind, they're trying to avoid the scent, the adrenaline that they're about to unleash, being blown by the wind into the noses of its prey, and the prey then picking up that there's a lion in the vicinity. But obviously, because wind moves the way wind moves, some of it will get to the prey and it will have a faint, and then we're dead, you know? And then they say the hunting exercise is about 10 minutes. 10 minutes, and the target is gone dead on the ground, and they start eating. Obviously, the male lion will eat first, then the females, and then you name it. They say the hunt itself is about 30 minutes, nothing longer than 30 minutes. So everything that you know about a lion that makes you call it the king of the jungle happens in 30 minutes. Everything else, the lion is asleep or it's bonding with its pride. But it's so impactful in that 30 minutes that it's enough to send shockwaves throughout the course of time, that whenever you come across a lion, you respect it. That is how impactful being in your aura is. That is what it means when it comes together, the education of a king, and you are in your element. You start doing 5 minutes of work, and it's got generational reverberations, it's got generational impact. Mozart apparently was an expert by the age of 10. It's that sort of coming together of all the elements of the education of a king, that when you are then complete, who you are is itself. And that's when Madiba opens his mouth, his voice vibrates the room, his voice reverberates. You can hear the words, but more than the words, you get the gift that time is giving you. That this is a momentous occasion. When I walk away, this is what needs to happen. And I'm even going to add my own in that one. It's actually not even my own. It's the law of the lid in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. Law number 1 of leadership, the law of the lid. The room moves to the energy of the best leader in the room. Whenever you're sitting in a room, the best leader, everybody, within a certain amount of time, so I don't know if it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, starts to acclimatize to their energy. That is not even to say necessarily the president. So you could be sitting with Obama, Bush, you name it, and the energy just moves towards my grandfather, for example. And that's because when it comes to the leadership capacity of the people sitting in that room, my grandfather has a higher frequency and a higher resonance, a higher language with nature, with the cosmos, with food, with history, with whatever, than all the other leaders. And they say you don't even have to be on stage speaking. Just by you being in the room, the atmosphere is such that energy moves towards you. So it happens that, for example, someone powerful that everybody has been looking forward to sitting and hearing their lecture comes to speak to us. And then obviously there will be guest lecturers, whatever, and they be underwhelming. And we say maybe they were unprepared, maybe they were off, what happens, wara, wara, wara. It sometimes is because in that same room, there was someone else with a higher leadership frequency, a higher mastery of whatever that person was doing. And unbeknownst to anybody else, the energy shifted to them. And that's part of why Q&A is actually important, because sometimes what then happens is that that person lifts up their hand and asks a question. And when they ask a question, it elicits a response from the speaker that starts to change the dialogue of the subject matter in such a way that actually, when we're done, we can now again feel as if it was one of the best sermons or one of the best lectures or one of the best whatever symposiums or webinars or seminars I've ever attended, because the energy was restored. Your body got to reconcile why it was feeling like that in that particular room when that person asked the question and the dialogue happened and the engagement happened. And so it happened. And sometimes it's even with kids. There are kids that when they walk into a room, the adults stop talking. Not stop talking, yeah, let's give the kids attention. They stop talking. Yeah, or this kid commands something in the adults in the room and they start behaving in a certain manner. For example, there's some kids when they walk into a room, adults start hiding alcohol. And you and I, when we explain it, we would say it's because they don't want the kid to see them drinking. Sometimes, I would even say a lot of the times, because kids carry that lid, that leadership lid, that bravery, that innocence slash openness or communication with the elements, that they command a level of respect from you as an elder in the same room as a kid. And that's why you then start adjusting your behavior. You think you're adjusting your behavior because you don't want to teach the kids certain habits. Some of it sometimes is actually because the energy of the kid commands that you behave better, that you do better. That concludes the education of a king. I might have left one or two elements out, or the elements come together in such a way that they create an additional element that I probably would never be able to articulate in words. That is some of the things that you need to understand and hopefully embody if you want to engage in this conversation of we are kings and queens. Let's act in our era and Bayhive and this sort of thing and whatever. And also when we start talking about want to start decolonizing education or want to, all these things that we say we want to do as a society, at least from a leadership and a king's perspective, you at least need to be able to communicate with the elements. You need to be able to be in a certain aura and have a certain presence about you when these sort of things are happening, because the insights that get unlocked, the ideas that get unlocked, the ability to believe in ourselves, the ability to come up with solutions that are bigger than our continent and ourselves will come from that. I posted a status from a conversation I had yesterday with Pearl while we're working on something and some of the things we're engaging on. And I said, you know, some Black people don't think they can ever be richer than Patrice Motsepe or Aliko Dangote or the Oppenheimers or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. Bill Gates is a particular one because for the longest time ever, Bill Gates was the richest man in the world. And before you know it, 4 or 5 guys that we previously did not know, Jeff Bezos, Carlos Slim, Warren Buffett himself, Elon Musk. So nobody's overtook him. And it's telling that they're not all Black, they're not all. Carlos Slim is the only white one. And if I remember correctly, I think Carlos Slim, as much as he's Mexican, whatever, if you trace his family lineage, apparently comes from the East somewhere. Either is Jewish or Israeli or something like that. I don't want to touch on that. I'm outside of my scope of competence. But coming to you being able to believe that you can become that, right? If you don't, then that's why we don't have some of the solutions that we have. You are unable to solve problems at a multi-generational level, such that you can't even fathom that you can one day become the richest man in the world. And that's because you've lost your ability to have access to that part of yourself that says, actually, I can do this. And it's crazy because in sports, in music, we access it. In music, we're willing to say, I'm going to be the greatest of all time. Yet we don't do it in the avenues and the fields that affect us the most, that enable us to protect our women and children the most, in governance, in politics, in business. But we do it in music and in sport and these airy, flary, nice things that are never really going to elevate us as a people to become in our rightful position as leaders, and what have you. But as I was saying, that's the education of a king. It's something that I've been meaning to get out there. I left out even things like exercise, wara wara wara, and reading and knowledge and learning the best, this, that, that. But that's because from a conceptual perspective, from a conceptual level, those now become tactics. I don't remember reading anywhere in the biography of Napoleon that he would sit and practice at night. Practice for Napoleon was battle. Practice for Toussaint Louverture was battle. Practice for Genghis Khan was battle. Practice for Elon Musk is battle. So if you need to go to Virgin Active for you to get into the shape of your life, please do. I'm not gonna sit on that. I'm not gonna crap on that. But also be careful that actually battle might be what gets you in the shape of your life. I also didn't touch on self-defense, fighting, that sort of a thing. Again, because those are tactical. Those are things that if you go back to my grandfather's age, even the weakest man knew that if you violate his boundaries, he will respond the way a man responds. He didn't need to take self-defense classes and that sort of a thing. I've got full comfort that if you get that education correct, then things will click for you. 99% of us don't do this and won't do this, and that's okay. As I said, I just wanted to let you know that there's such a type of education exists. It's called the education of a king. It's not a book, it's not a movie, it's not whatever. It's something that I coined myself, having studied history and read books and synthesized and been in rooms and wara 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 wara. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's a book that you can find that says how to become a king or how to raise a king and how to take leadership. And that's why we read biographies, by the way, to try and piece together how Rockefeller became the richest man in history, or how who this person became the strongest fighter or the best footballer or whatever. I've got Messi's biography here. We're trying to get that education of a king. We're trying to get what are the natural elements that conspired to create this person that rose above everybody in his time, and possibly in some instances, everybody that has ever preceded him, and even give us the confidence that anybody that will ever come after him. I'm Chairman Mo. It's been a privilege speaking to you. It's been a privilege sharing my mindset with you. Until the next time and until the next one. Cheers.